Hello, everyone. It is my final day in Stockholm. It's been such an incredible trip. I will leave all of my previous videos linked below, although you can watch them in any order, so no pressure there. We are going to see more galleries today. This is the gallery district. There are tons of galleries in this one building, which is extremely convenient. I will say sometimes I don't love that because it can feel a little bit like a mall, but actually each of the gallery spaces are quite unique, so I don't find that you get that feeling here, and it's really enjoyable. Our first stop of the day is going to be Cecilia Hillstrom Gallery. And I love this work by Clay Ketter in the entrance of these oversized plastic drawing rulers that I know we used to have as kids. This is a viewing room area featuring works by two of the gallery's artists, Ellen Odentia and Fredrik Soderberg. So Fredrik Soderberg is a Stockholm-based artist who creates these really detailed, geometric watercolor works, which I think is fascinating because they don't actually look like watercolor in the traditional sense. And they're infused with references to art history, philosophy, and even Catholicism. In contrast, Ellen Odentia, another Swedish artist, creates these paintings where you can barely detect a brushstroke on the geometric forms. And I love how these works feel simultaneously vintage and futuristic. This is another viewing room within the gallery, and I love how intimate this one is. It reminds me of someone's living room. This is the main exhibit on view, and it's titled My Garden by the Iranian artist Samaneh Rehani. So Rehani's main source of inspiration for the show was the poem The Leafless Garden by Mehdi Akavan-Sales, which tells a story of, quote, mourning and can be read as a description of an inner personal state of mind as well as a collective one, telling the story of both personal and collective grief. So there are many representations of grief present in this scene. The various sculptures represent a garden walled off by these wooden doorways painted in flowers. And I think this represents not only a physical barrier to the garden, but an emotional barrier as well, that we can often put up during times of grief, isolating ourselves from those around us. Inside of the garden, we see various depictions of plants and trees and these really heavy materials like wood and marble, again depicting that emotional heaviness, but also a physical heaviness represented in things like the trees that lack any form of life. They're just these spike-like forms, and the plants represented in this spiked wood as well as rough marble. They sort of lack the softness that you normally see in organic forms, and instead there's this harshness present. We're now going to head over to the neighboring GSA gallery to see an exhibit by the Swedish artist Michael Johansson. The show is titled Pause and consists of a series of sculptures created from everyday objects where the familiar becomes extraordinary. And the goal of using these everyday objects for Johansson is that viewers will be triggered to, quote, explore and reflect on the complexity of life and the depth of memories. This is the largest piece in the exhibit, and it's very appropriately titled Shelf Life. And it was inspired by Johansson's process of storing the objects he used to create his sculptures. So he used shelves as sort of a visual library, organizing the various objects by color. When speaking about his own works, Johansson says, quote, "It's important that the art speaks a language that successfully invites the viewer in, but it must also contain something surprising, something that distinguishes itself from everyday life and how one usually perceives things. Otherwise, it's not exciting." I do think the way that Johansson has organized these objects into both color categories, but also these forms, injects that level of excitement needed to elevate this from just everyday object to artwork. Here in the viewing room are works by two artists that the gallery represents, Tony Cragg and Katrin Westman. So Cragg, as you all know, is a very established sculptor who's known for creating these vortex or tornado-like organic sculptures. And Katrin Westman is an emerging artist who's really making a name for herself. As I mentioned in my Market Art Fair video, Westman designed the electric BMW, taking guests to and from the fair this year. And her paintings are inspired by art history, particularly the Baroque period, which you can really see in her rich color palette and in the, quote, drama, decadence, and dynamics of the paintings. Our next stop is Gallery Duer, which is still in the same building, and they have two shows on view by the Swedish artists Tove Moritzson and Lynn Hertzsted. This show is titled Keeper by Tove Moritzen, and it features a series of portraits, landscapes, and still lives that capture the quote, everyday rhythms of domestic life at home with family, pets, and Swedish traditions, but simultaneously incorporating dreamlike atmospheres that allude to the exotic, the vintage, or mythical. I really love how the gallery describes her work. They say that she is, quote, one of the few artists that capture the simple pleasures and poetic essence of a place, people, and time. This exhibit is titled Gentle Pressure, and it features sculptures by the artist Lynn that are, quote, inspired by beauty trends and anti-aging face creams, from which the marketing of these products has been both good and bad for society for several decades. Once you know that that's the inspiration, you can't help but notice what appear to be these beautifully organic sculptures are actually things like sliced lipsticks, beauty blenders, creamy lotions, and even face masks, which I think is brilliant. The exaggerated size of the works in combination with the creamy pastel color palette really capture the enticing indulgence these beauty products kind of want us to experience and be influenced by. Our next stop is Berg Gallery, which is still in the same building, located on the ground level. And this is an exhibit of works by the Swedish artist Elisabeth Thun titled Gränsland. And they explore the themes of, quote, memory, identity, and the passage of time. Each of the paintings feature, quote, interior scenes and landscapes, majestic residential homes, museum buildings, waterfalls, and verdant forest paths. All places that Thun has visited and experienced over time that have made a lasting impression on her. And her painting technique is meant to reflect that idea of memory, using these transparent layers to depict the concept of past and present, memory and reality, applying it all to the same image. And the title of the show, which is Gränsland, translates to border country, roughly in English, which could represent a zone of transition between nature and city life, between man-made and organic. And this is also captured really well in Thun's works. Our final stop before we take a little break for lunch will be Gallery Nordenhaka, which is right next door to Berg Gallery. And we've had the privilege of visiting Nordenhaka's Mexico City location many times. I'll be sure to leave those videos linked above and below if you'd like to check that out. But this exhibit is of paintings by the Swedish artist Cecilia Edefalk titled "I'm Not Here, I'm Dreaming." The exhibition title is so fitting. Each of the paintings reimagine an original watercolor by Carl Wilhelmsen of a woman on a rocky coastline overlooking a west coast seascape in a thinned tempera and cobalt blue pigment, which really gives the impression of capturing a soul or a dream, but something that's not entirely tangible in the conscious realm. This is apparently a common theme in Edenfalk's work. Most of her subjects have an ethereal, otherworldly quality to them. And this isn't surprising given her unique artistic process, and I will say this is a first for me. So Edenfalk will connect with deceased artists through things like a seance in order to receive advice on how to create her works. And this is exactly what she did with Carl Wilhelmsen. We're now going to take a quick break for lunch just around the corner before heading to our final gallery of the day. Just around the corner from the main building with all the galleries where we just were is Kulis Gallery. And this is an exhibit by the Polish artist Bartosz Kowal titled See and Save, which is referencing the images that we choose to retain in our memories. Kowal achieves capturing this in multiple ways in his works, starting with the close cropping of his images, which is reminiscent to how our minds hold on to memories. We often only remember small pieces of larger scenes. Another thing is his muted color palette and this hazy application of paint, which also depicts the sort of fuzziness often associated with memories. Something that I thought was really interesting about Kowal's technique is that he completes each work in one sitting, and it takes him over 12 hours. So he paints in very thin layers to achieve this really beautiful blurred effect. Our next stop is a little different than what I'm used to showing you all, but fear not, it is art related. We are at the Stockholm School of Economics, and you may be wondering, why? Well, we are here to learn about their art initiative, which, quote, embeds art in the academic environment to make the school even more knowledge intensive and to enrich the lives of students, faculty, and staff. So when I was talking to them about it, they said that given that the school is producing future leaders, it was really important to them to equip them with the cultural knowledge in addition to their more STEM-based education. And I think that's so critical to produce more well-rounded, just thoughtful leaders in the world. Art is a mirror to society, in my opinion. So if you can understand contemporary art, I think you can better understand society. and therefore be a better leader. The initiative has a lot of different parts to it, including bringing works of contemporary art into the school to display. There are art talks, there's a literary component, but one of my favorite parts of the program were these art classrooms. So various artists are given classrooms to transform, and there are quite a few of them. I will leave links about each of them in the description box below if you'd like to read about all of them, because they are quite extraordinary. Our final art-related stop of the day, and actually the entire trip, is really, really special. This is the Carl Eld Museum. So if you're not familiar, Carl Eld was one of the most prominent Swedish sculptors during the 20th century, and this was his studio, which has now been converted into a museum, which houses over 1,000 sketches and nearly 500 of his plaster casts and works. In addition to his own works, the museum has a program where they partner with emerging contemporary artists. For this summer, they've partnered with the Swedish artist Malin Gabriella Norden, who's created a new series of drawings, paintings, collages, and sculptures, all inspired by Eld's works. So Norden's works are on display in parallel with Eld's, and I personally love that contrast of new and old, of colorful and neutral. And I also had the opportunity to meet Norden and discuss the new works and her process, and that was really special. And as we continue to explore the studio, I challenge you to keep an eye out for Norden's works amongst Eld's. We're now going to head back to Hotel Nobis and end the night and the trip with a really fabulous 5-course vegan meal at the Greenhouse, which I highly recommend. The food was wonderful. I will say it does strangely turn into a club of some sort as the night progresses, so be aware of that. But we really enjoyed our dinner. It was amazing, and we actually ended our night at Soho House, which I mentioned in my last video. It's in this really beautiful converted church, so that was a lot of fun and a great way to end the trip. And that was my trip to Stockholm. I will be back in New York for probably one more video before I take a little break for the summer, so stay tuned for that. And I'm so glad that I could share this wonderful country with you all. I really, really had the best time.